If we can figure out how to go into like a new state of cooperation or collaboration, maybe we can, innovate and iterate in ways that allow us to create, scalable and replicable, self-sustaining systems.
And we are off. Beautiful. So here at Envision, this is the first time we meet, but I've known about your work for a long time. Who are you? What are you passionate about? And what brings you here?
Well, my name is Daniel Pinchbeck, and I'm a writer, and I've also been an entrepreneur and done a bunch of other things, but I've written a number of books. I wrote a book called Breaking Open the Head that was about psychedelic shamanism, and it came out in 2002, so it was kind of before the big new wave of the psychedelic renaissance, and I think it probably helped sort of change cultural perception around psychedelics. I mean, I was in New York, and up until that point, you couldn't really talk about psychedelics in New York or in the mainstream. They were just kind of ridiculed and dismissed. And I think it was more of an intellectual book in a way, and it helped reframe the psychedelic experience a little bit. Second book was called 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl. And that book was looking at prophecies of a range of ancient and traditional cultures, like the
Mayan calendar
and the Hopi, and even the Judeo-Christian idea of the apocalypse, and the Hindu idea of the Yuga cycles, and so on. And I basically explored a lot of different subjects, cult subjects, and stuff about the psyche and psychic realities, and some stuff about crop circles in England and extraterrestrials, and really allowed myself to kind of just dive in, and ended up thinking that there was definitely something to these ideas of a shift in the ages or an epochal transformation that's happening, and then kind of tried to articulate that through different lenses, looking at like Carl Jung and Rudolf Steiner and different philosophers and thinkers, Jose Arguelles, Terence McKenna, and so on. And then then I got involved in starting this company, Evolver, Evolver.net, and a Way Out Web magazine, Reality Sandwich, actually still going.
Yeah, I know about
involved. Yeah. So
you started that?
I did.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was a while back now. And then, so then that sort of took me on a different path. I made a documentary called 2012 Time for Change. I hosted a talk show with Gaiam TV. And then finally I wrote a third book, How Soon Is Now, which was basically an effort to I feel that people weren't really able to confront what was happening ecologically, and it was just too overwhelming. And this is something actually that had been a through line in my other books also. So, and if the 2012 book was looking at the situation we're in on a more like occult, metaphysical, philosophical perspective, I felt that then you needed like a map for, how things could be redesigned or changed to avert, our steady path towards ecological obliteration.
Totally.
Yeah, and the framing of that book was looking at the ecological crisis as a whole, as something like a rite of passage or initiation for humanity, like a shamanic initiation. Because if you look
at a journey, like a hero's journey of sorts that we have to like collectively go through.
Right. I mean, if you look at that's been a big theme of a lot of my work has been initiation. Like if you look at every culture around the world, pretty much until modern industrial civilization, they would have rites of passage or initiations. And often they would involve actually, the young people having to go through some ordeal to get into a visionary or transpersonal state. So then once they were able to get out of their egoic consciousness, then they would have a different sense of themselves and a different sense of their relationship to the planet and to the community and so on. And then there would be elders who would kind of sort of guide them through their process of awakening and understanding, and sort of give them the mythological and cultural framework for understanding that experience. So this guy Joseph Chilton Pearce wrote a book called The Biology of Transcendence, where he talked about how these kind of initiations might actually have almost like a neurophysiological function, because we are the newest parts of our brain are the prefrontal cortex or the neocortex, which only developed in the last few 100,000 years, and that's where we use language and process abstract symbols and plan for the future. But it also kind of separates us from it pulls us into an individuated egoic state of consciousness.
Yes.
And so if you don't have something like a transpersonal or visionary experience, then you get trapped. You get locked into that egoic state.
Yeah, you get trapped in you.
Yeah,
you get trapped in the fact that like it feels like the world revolves around you in a sense, and then you create this kind of scenario where you're you're always operating from a perspective of how do I enrich myself versus how do I enrich the culture or the community that I'm a part of as well, right? It doesn't mean that like by doing one you're excluding the other. In reality, you can do both, and that's to me what like freedom culture stands for in many ways, is that we have our individual freedom and sovereignty and gifts that we want to bring to the table, and we want to be able to make a living from and be able to share with the world. But then we also have the culture in which we are participating in, and we want to be able to see how we can play that also supports other people, that is also kind of like mindful of our ecological footprint, mindful of the socioeconomic forces that it implies, right? Everything that I take and do, I mean, the fact that I have a podcast studio in the middle of the jungles of Costa Rica says that I'm in a category of humans at the moment that is incredibly fortunate and privileged. And if everyone lived like me, like I Googled this as the average Canadian, if everyone lived like me, we would need like 5 planets to survive.
Yeah.
So I really have a question about like, after all the studying and research you've done around some of these different things, like not only the rites of passage and all the things, but even the ecological reality that we are facing right now, are you hopeful? Like, are you actually hopeful that we as humans are going to continuously move through this? And if so, like, what is making you doubt this, or what is making you hopeful?
That's a great question. I mean, I don't know about hopeful, but I'm certainly intrigued. I mean, I'm fascinated. I mean, first of all, I do have more of a mystical or metaphysical perspective. I mean, it's absolutely impossible that we're like here right now, like the amount of evolutionary, serendipity that it took for this to happen.
Insane.
So, I think probably like, consciousness, it's more like there's like more an evolutionary, pull than a push. Like we're being, pulled towards other evolutionary states or something. And this may just be a phase that has to go through. I mean, even if we end up not being able to be on the planet physically, there may even be some other types of...
Well, maybe we're AI, right? Like maybe our consciousness and humans... Maybe humans are here to give birth to AI.
Yeah, I don't really enjoy that idea.
I'm not saying I do either. I'm just saying it is
also,
possible.
As people who live in the technological world and lifestyle, I feel it's a cop out. It's kind of an excuse because it allows us to ignore the fact that our own culture and then our own personal actions are so connected to. The fact that like Sudan and Somalia and Syria are having these mega droughts that are leading to, and that's just
leading to radicalization and all the things,
and just famine.
Yes, totally.
I mean, we're unfortunately our lifestyle is kind of dooming a lot of people in the world right now.
Totally.
Yeah. So for me, the only hope is, and that's why I guess I come to places like Envision, is that maybe in the technological kind of post-capitalist worldview that many people are kind of accessing, if we can figure out how to go into like a new state of cooperation or collaboration, maybe we can innovate and iterate in ways that allow us to create scalable and replicable self-sustaining systems, both in terms of kind of technologies, whether it's like regen villages and stuff like that, or social tools and social technologies. That's another whole subject of How Soon Is Now is looking at love and eros as one of the big issues. And I visited a few times a community in Portugal called Tamara. Have you been there or heard about it?
I've heard about it, yeah. Just for context, I started an eco-village in Montreal. Oh, you did? So it's a 66-acre property, so I've like been learning about and studying eco-villages as a whole for a long time. Mainly through like permaculture and earthship, so now like kind of regenerative agriculture, farming, those kinds of practices, and ecologically responsible building and all those different things. So I'm very passionate about this, but I do know a ton about Tamara.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a good answer about the hopefulness, but I am really fascinated and intrigued, and it feels like we're in like an incredible movie.
I mean, we are in the ultimate movie. You couldn't write a script better than this. So you mentioned something, and obviously we're coming to you live from Mastermind and kind of Envision Festival here in Costa Rica. One of the interesting things to me that I struggle with is whether or not I'm actually participating in the problem or in the solution. Mm-hmm. Certain times, like I'm literally like dancing the line between like, is me coming to Envision actually supporting the new world in a sense, right? Like people want to call it game B. That's what a lot of people have been saying around here, at least. But whatever that is, right? The next evolution where we step into better balance or all these things, or maybe there's not that balance, and maybe the chaos creates a new world balance, in which many people may suffer, and surely that some degree of that will happen. It's already happening, in fact. Like, is coming to a festival of this nature, like, is the net ripple of impact of this positive or negative in your worldview? And I guess you're partially biased, you're here, but I'm interested in like kind of really philosophizing around that, because I do experience guilt around it.
Well, I mean, I do think it's a problem that, a lot of people in, let's say, our extended, like, social networks probably overlap a lot, live these kind of global nomadic lifestyles.
Yeah.
And it's actually become, like, this hip thing, like on Instagram or Facebook.
Totally.
It's like, oh, there's me with the with the Bornean Aboriginals with the penis cords.
Yeah.
There's me in the ashram. There's me doing ayahuasca. And, so
it's almost like there's a showmanship to it.
Yeah, but we've kind of, and I think it's a part of kind of neo-colonialism that we've valorized, like, these exotic experiences.
Yeah.
And so then, particularly people who are quite wealthy, who are part of, like, this whole, Burning Man festival culture, they're going all around the world. But I think what happens then is, there's a lack of just building, like, local utopia. Because if you always feel that you can escape to the next cool thing, then you don't necessarily feel as committed to going as deep as you could, and wherever you happen to be.
This is exactly my challenge. Mm-hmm. My challenge, like, I'll preface, I've never been to Burning Man. I know it's amazing as an experience, without a doubt. I would love it in many ways. And where I am troubled by it is the idea of, like, I feel this need to create Building Man, essentially. Right?
Well, actually, I have a friend who does Building Man in Utah.
Oh, really? Beautiful.
You don't have to create it. You can go visit.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, totally. I mean, I think, like, the ethos of that, right? Which is even, like, the way we're doing this right now. My goal with building the stage and the little tiny house there, which is a wellness lounge, and this tree house, all these things, is my goal is that every year it like builds more community and kind of grounds it down more and more and more. And my challenge with Envision as a space or a venue is that it's not like a year-round community. Mm-hmm. I wish it was, right? I wish we could host these festivals at places where a year-round community would benefit from it, because the infrastructure that is built through an event of this nature could drastically now empower people to step out of game A, right? Again, to use the lingo that's been floating around here at this time, into game B, into a shared reality where they are, embodying some of the social, economic, I would even say political philosophies that are kind of an experiment towards what could emerge. What is the next thing? I'm also curious about your take on, like, some of the technological revolutions that we are going through, right? Like, what's your take on how social media, even blockchain technologies, some of these technologies are going to step in place to actually inform our way forward? Like, last year at this time, for example, there was a ton of talk about crypto. We hosted a talk about cryptocurrencies here at our stage, and the whole place was full. Like, it was packed because it was hot, right? Yeah. This year, crypto is almost like an afterthought. Nobody wants to talk about it because realistically, people were excited about the technology, but they were more excited about making money or quick buck in some way, shape, or form. At least that's what the trend between last year and this year is kind of informing. That being said, there's a ton of people obviously still putting work into it. What role do you think it plays? Where does technology support or empower us in all of this? Yeah,
well, there's like a whole number of ideas and questions kind of meshed together in that. But yes, so I mean, if we're going to get out of this pickle, which I'm not sure we're going to, but if we are, it's going to be like templates that are, scalable and replicable exponentially. Yes. It's not going to be some kind of linear, progress like we've seen in the past. It'll be, we'll have
exponential technology.
We'll have 3D printers. Suddenly we'll have like, compost toilets that anybody can manufacture all around the world. Apparently the only answer that I've heard, for like ocean acidification, for instance, would be gigantic kelp farms in the oceans, like 6% of the oceans or something. Yep. And then you would have a massive amount of kelp, which is probably not the tastiest thing in the world, but you could use it to feed all the people who are like now starving in Somalia and Sudan and so on. Yeah. As you figured out how to, reforest and resettle. So I do think there is actually that type of possibility is available. Like there could be a switchover, where enough of the people who are at the top of the sort of social and financial pyramid are like, oh, it doesn't matter if if I'm Sergey Brin and I have $50 billion, or I'm Zuckerberg or
Yep.
Bezos, because in a few years there's no planet left to enjoy that $53 billion. And this idea of going to Mars, I actually just was working on a little project around settling Mars in London Design Museum, and there's nothing there. It is, it's not going to be a fun experience. The soil is toxic. If you if you go outside without a pressurized suit, all the blood in your body would boil in like 1 minute.
Oof.
So there's no water. I mean, I guess there's some ice caps they can figure out how to melt that stuff
Sure.
down. I mean, it's going to be a hellish scenario. Probably better for like robots. That could be a great place for AI. Actually, we could take the AI and
just send it there.
Send it out there.
Yeah, and let it like start proliferating over that way.
So anyway, and even Burning Man to me is very interesting because it shows how culture is something that's so instant. Like people go to Burning Man for the first time, and you take a group of corporate lawyers, probably you're probably experiencing similar things here.
Yeah.
And they have that instant culture shift where suddenly it's like leave no trace, no money exchanged, gift economy. So in 2 days you'll see somebody who's like a corporate lawyer sociopath, and they'll be like giving out their drugs and hugging everyone and wearing a tutu. Because suddenly that's how they get positive reinforcement.
That is shifting their culture slowly but surely, even back in their jobs. Even if they don't quit their job the next day and like start changing the world, they still have been profoundly impacted by experiences of that.
Right. And then an anthropology, I guess I've been going to Burning Man for like 18 or 19 years.
Wow.
But then you see kind of like the counterculture ethos getting kind of like co-opted and absorbed into the Illuminati corporate culture.
Yeah.
And then now Marion Goodall has issued this letter saying that the culture has been really polluted, and they kind of have to break it back and change it in some direction. Remember what the original ideas and ethoses were of the Burning Man. So, yeah, I mean that's like I guess how culture evolves. But I do think people need to have experiences of like different cultural parameters, whether it's something like Tamara, where it's a whole model of how can you reorganize relationships. Is monogamy the only way, or monogamishedness the only way that people can have relative happiness in their intimate lives?
Yep.
Or could there be a whole system redesign where you have multi-partners, and other types of erotic experiences, but in a supportive culture that's based on authentic, transparent relating, and really kind of enforces that almost Germanically.
Yeah. I think that like what I find, and this is the conclusion that I'm at it, and is that these festivals, these scenarios, because they're temporary, allow us to create. They're literally the experiments of culture, right? Like this is where we get to like blur the lines a little bit and see if reality pushed in this direction or that direction feels a little bit better, or if there's a breakdown or an unlearning of what we've come to accept, right? Like when I grew up, most of what I understood was that monogamy was the best thing ever. Now, as I'm getting older, maybe I'm understanding something different. Now, I don't feel like personally I'm there, or that's my necessary need, but I understand that I can accept something different for other people, and that there's like maybe variations of ways, and we're seeing that acceptance in all fronts, right? I mean, we see it with like even LGBTQ rights, right? Like we have more and more cultural acceptance around maybe there is nuances and differences of way that people feel. Now, that could go to the extreme, like, at what point, like, even some people are going to push back and be like, there's only two genders. And then that creates like a massive social issue. And I don't know where I stand on any of this, but what I'm trying to say is that there's like an experiment going down, and I appreciate that experiment in these festival-like scenarios, in these temporary solutions. One of the things I feel really intrigued by, and I would love your perspective on this, is the idea around like Dunbar's number, right? Like you if you've studied kind of cultures and much of our past, what you know is that for most of humanity, we operate in tribes. And in those tribes, they have this kind of theory around Dunbar's number, which is that about 150 people big, the community starts to erode. How do you feel about that? Like, I mean, is it possible that we're going to get back to some level of tribe-like scenario? I mean, we are in some ways, but where are your thoughts around like Dunbar's number? Where are your thoughts around like self-organizing communities?
Well, I mean, I thought the Dunbar number was more about like the number of kind of like other human connections, relationships you can manage to handle and maintain to some extent.
Yeah, maintain trust with, basically.
Yeah, so, there again, maybe that's a use for blockchain, because you can have social trust. You know, so it's like you know, we know this guy is fine because he's been fine in the past, so then we can use. You know, you can use Daniel dollars because your friends, you know, David tells you that Daniel dollars are okay. You know? So yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, it would be some skillful melding of kind of you know, ways that we create social trust and you know, utilize social technologies to make that very transparent and accessible. So it would be kind of, you know, but still allowing us to live in large urban centers, because those are also ecologically the best way that humans can live right now if they're handled properly. You know, we have a lot of humans on the planet.
Yes. Yeah. Do you feel are there too many humans on the planet? Or do we think we're past the carrying capacity?
It does feel like there's a lot of humans on the planet. I mean, I like you know, Alan Watts. There's a whole thing about like the apple tree, apples, and the Earth is peopling. So it does feel like the Earth is just naturally peopling, which also kind of might argue for this idea that we're meant to settle other planets or other worlds, like an apple, you know, rolls into another orchard, or you know, seeds get carried away somewhere. So so you know, I don't like to see it's too many. I don't like Malthusian ideas, and we do know that at the moment, like, resources are allocated unbelievably inefficiently, and we could actually feed and take care of this, you know, 7.8 billion people we have now.
Oh yeah, we just have to get more efficient around it.
Yeah,
and we have to like drop some of the. It's almost the economics of it that sometimes hold us back.
It's all the economics of it. I mean, unfortunately, neocolonialism, which we're still a part of, which you know is here. You know, this is basically in many ways neocolonial, but. You know, is an extraction machine, which is taking the resources of, you know, most of the world that and, you know, through military domination and economic domination, shifting them to people like us, so that we get to have these experiences.
Amazing. So I have a good question for you, and it's a tough one. If you were to become kind of the ruler of the planet, and you can change one particular thing, because I see you as a kind of a systems thinker of sorts, right? Like you're really looking at the macro and then observing how it goes down into the micro. So if you could shift one thing at the macro that you believe would trickle all the way down to, you know, the way that our world lives, what change would you invoke? Like what thing would you bring forward if you can kind of push humanity in a direction that maybe is safer for it, or, you know, in a more empowering.
No, absolutely. Well, I mean, you know, people might have different ways that they would intervene. I mean, I appreciate you said systems thinker like Buckminster Fuller is one of my big heroes. I wrote about him a lot in How Soon Is Now.
He's amazing.
But I think that what we need is like a media/network that's completely focused on accessible solutions, how people can support things that are amazing, and on any level, and sort of like a Facebook/global Fox News that's totally for the good.
Wow.
So and I think it's, you know, I sort of almost don't even understand why we don't have that yet. I mean, you know, Facebook is still only like a 15-year old company that's reaches over 2 billion people a day, which is, you know, almost everybody of affluent means in the whole planet. So you know,
that's a lot of people.
Yeah, so it's like. You know, could we engineer another type of media/network that has that type of accessibility? And, you know, I mean, actually, I helped organize like a summit at Facebook headquarters around climate change. I mean, you know, we were trying to convince them to make some kind of intervention. Like, you know, why couldn't they say on the front page of Facebook, hey, you know, dear human family member, you know, it happens that we've overshoot our ecological carrying capacity. Here's everything you need to know about what's happening on the planet. Here's what you can do locally. You know, here's how you can.
Which is beautiful because they have the capacity to do that.
Yeah.
There's nothing that says that Facebook isn't beautiful, because it could be.
Facebook or Google could do that. Well, Facebook, I don't think is beautiful at all. I think it's terrible.
I personally agree. I'm just saying it could be.
You know, like, so for instance, and so Facebook has shown us the potentiality of these network communications tools on a global scale, but then it thwarts the potential to use them for truly, you know, useful or emancipatory purposes.
Yes.
So
for instance, the algorithms are just crushing.
So like Evolver, you know, has like a 3.5 million person group on Facebook. Yeah, we can't get that group to vote. Like, if we were able to go to that group every day and be like, hey, do you all want to like boycott Monsanto together?
Yeah.
96% of them would probably be in. Or do we want to, like, you know, say to a company like Apple, like, we love your products, we want you to, like, manufacture them differently, do them
Yeah.
components based rather than having to throw out the whole thing every year or two.
Yeah, it's very difficult to spend so much time building on a network of that nature, and then be limited by it because of the economics of it.
They're still trying to squeeze out the traditional profit.
Yes.
With advertising.
Yeah.
And it's just a killer model. Like when we were going to do this summit around this idea of getting them to get more involved with climate change as an issue, which we couldn't get any traction on at all. Then we would go into the bathroom, and in the stall there would be like, the news of the week for Facebook. In Detroit, this car dealership had gone up 45% sales that week because of their targeted use of Facebook ads.
So that's the kind of information that's floating around in their culture, I guess.
Well, that's what that's their revenue model. That's how they're building an incredibly profitable enterprise.
Yeah, that's the challenge. I mean, this begs the question: does something of this nature? So I guess part of what you're saying is, if we build something of this nature that wasn't like a private company, but that had like more of the elements of less about like the ROI of return on investment and more so of the ROI of ripple of impact. Essentially, could we have a news network that enables us to see and seed the solutions? Because I agree, like one of the biggest challenges that I notice is that 90% of every documentary I watch is talking about the problem.
Right.
And then about 10% of the time, they're either saying we need to do something about it, or maybe they're spending a little bit of time championing the solutions.
That model is not working at all.
But
it doesn't inspire people. It doesn't empower them.
No, it makes us feel small.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It makes us feel super small, and then it makes us feel like, oh shit, now I know that the bees are vanishing, but I have no idea what to do about it. Right. And
so I mean that's actually a project that I've been working on. Would be something like that, where like you had all solution-focused media that was immediately, actionable through some type of network back end.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm in the inquisition around what it would take to build a small, like, right now where I'm at, like in theory, is my goal would be to build a 150 person group that adheres to a ton of these different solutions and starts embodying them and like really creating hyper engagement within a small community, but then having that be the drumbeat that like ripples out into a larger network of solutions and people who can then get access to those solutions. And the content game is a game that is very difficult. Like, one of the theories of this mastermind is that we wanted to create 104 pieces of content, 52 podcasts, 52 stage talks. We're effectively doing it. We're I think just a couple podcasts away from our target, and the stage talks are all happening, and that's seemingly all going to work out. Now, what's really interesting to me is how do we, like, the next piece is how do I find organizations that are willing to help sponsor this content, right? That are part of the solution, that we enable their solutions. It's almost like, for me, the answer is that there's a need for what I would call a philanthropreneurship, right? We need entrepreneurs who are going to take on the world's biggest challenges and recognize that, being a financial model of that is going to be incredibly important and powerful. And then the second piece is the philanthropic side of it, which is once you've achieved a certain level of like stability financially, being able to have a team and have the core function of that organization operate, then the next thing should be figuring out how you give the rest of the money towards the common good of some kind. And what that common good is up for debate, of course, but there's something to be said about that. I think the change I would invoke if I had one opportunity would be to remove fractional reserve banking, essentially to remove this system of perpetual debt where there is more debt than there is money, because that creates this need for endless growth paradigm. And that inherently leads to the capitalisms and the isms, all the isms that say that we always need to push forward in order to do well. But sustaining, and even the word sustainability is just not sexy. It's just like not desirable.
I mean, in How Soon Is Now and in this documentary that we made years ago, 2012, Time for Change, we looked at different ideas around changing the monetary system. There's a thinker called Bernard Lietaer. He wrote a book called, his work? Yep. He wrote The Future of Money, and he talked about creating like a negative interest currency. So the longer you hold on to it,
it disintegrates.
Value.
Yep.
And another guy, Tom Greco, wrote about local exchange trading systems. The model. Yeah. So I think there are, there's the rudiments of a systemic redesign are out there.
Yeah.
And once again, it's you would need to get, and that's
And these were the testing grounds.
challenge- I mean, the problem has been, and the reason the U.S. has gone off in like just this sort of super wrong direction is like, 35 years ago, the Koch brothers were like, we don't like this great society. We don't like, how much better it's getting for more people, and now they're getting agitated and wanting more rights and so on. So they got all of their billionaire friends together in a kind of coterie, and they had a few meetings, a number of meetings. Then they were like, okay, once they had a coherence in what they agreed upon and believed, then they were like, okay, well, what do we need to make this strategic takeover of American society, just as you do a corporate takeover? It's like, okay, well, you need like intellectuals, you need think tanks, so you need the Heritage Foundation, you need the bell curve, and Charles Murray, talking about just sowing these doubts, so that there's this racialist undertone and that which allows for the possibility that you just take social services away. So they did an engineered, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars campaign on many levels. Like they're like, oh, like the left has these social movements like Occupy, and then we need to have social movements that look like Occupy. So we'll do AstroTurf.
They'll seed them.
Like the Tea Party and so on. So, but if you read the book Dark Money by Jane Mayer, it shows how totally strategic the whole enterprise was. So the progressives haven't done that. And obviously one reason is that you need those wealth holders who want to do something like this.
Yes.
And as part of wanting to do something like this and making it happen, they would have to sacrifice, some percentage of their excess wealth. And they would have to be willing to do that.
Yeah. And that's where like to me, again, philanthropreneurship is kind of like this interesting terminology and term.
Right.
Now, that being said, we do have to wrap up here.
Sure.
I would love for you to let us know a little bit more about your book. Let anybody who's listening to this know where they can find you, if they want to read some of these different books. Of course, I'm assuming it's all on Amazon and all the different places.
Of course,
but tell us a little bit about the latest book.
Breaking Open the Head, How Soon Is Now, 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl, or the three main books. I have a book coming out in September, which you can also pre-order on sort of an overview of ayahuasca that I co-wrote with a brilliant young woman who's working with Shipibo in Peru. That's called When Plants Dream. I have Pinchbeck.io is my website, and howsoonisnow.info is up there, and I'm findable on Twitter or Instagram.
All in places.
Daniel Pinchbeck, exactly. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your attention. Hit that like button if you have questions or comments or anything like that. Leave them in the comments below, and of course, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to share this with somebody if you found this conversation interesting. Thank you. We love you, and thanks for
that was
being
fun.
here.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.